All right, we are back with our very last chapter book read-along of Holes by Louis Sachar. We have made it to the end of this really fun story. But before we do, let's discuss with those who you're watching this with what you remember, maybe some of your favorite parts, some of your favorite characters, or just what happened in the last video. So discuss real quick, and then comes my review. Holes is about a boy named Stanley Yelnats. Stanley is always in the wrong place at the wrong time. He literally had a pair of shoes drop on his head, and they blamed him for stealing them. Well, they were really expensive shoes, and only his parents were the ones who believed that he didn't really steal them. Stanley was given the choice to go to prison or Camp Green Lake. Well, Camp Green Lake is a camp for boys who have gotten into trouble. But Stanley chose to go there. Camp Green Lake also does not have a lake, nor is it green. It is a big, dry, empty lake that the boys have to dig a hole out on in the hot, hot sun every day. To build character? Well, Stanley learns that the person who's running the camp, named the warden, is actually looking for something. Her and Mr. Sir and Mr. Pendanski and a few other counselors run the camp. Stanley and Zero run away from camp. Stanley going to find Zero, and they take refuge on what's called God's Thumb. They found water and a whole bunch of wild onions. They then came back to camp to get some more water and to escape. But first, they were going to look for that treasure from Kissin' Kate Barlow. We learned that Kissin' Kate Barlow was an outlaw. She robbed banks and stagecoaches and everyone in the Wild West. But first, she used to be a school teacher, and she lived in the town of Green Lake before the lake dried up. Well, that was 100 years ago, and people were not nice then. Kate Barlow fell in love with Sam the onion picker. Sam was black, and they did not like that. So they killed Sam and ran Catherine out of town, burning down the schoolhouse. She became an outlaw, and the lake dried up. Well, Stanley is connected to this because his great-grandfather was robbed by Kissin' Kate Barlow. She didn't kill him. He found refuge on God's Thumb too. And Kate took his money and his loot and buried it somewhere in the lake. One other thing we learned about is Stanley's no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. He made a deal with a woman named Madame Zeroni, and she cursed him when he broke the deal. So that's why Stanley is so unlucky, and all of their family is pretty unlucky. But we also learn one more thing about this. Zero, Stanley's friend, his full name is Hector Zeroni. The last thing we learned, back in the present, Stanley and Zero survived being in a hole with a lot of yellow spotted lizards. Whew, those things are dangerous. And they found the treasure of Kissin' Kate Barlow. Well, one more thing. Stanley got a lawyer, apparently his parents got one, and they proved that he is innocent. He did not steal those shoes. So she came and was going to take him back home. Well, they looked down at the suitcase that Zero had been holding and read it. Zero read it. It said Stanley Yelnats on the suitcase. The warden could not believe it. And that is where we're going to pick up our story. Chapter 48. They slowly walked back to camp. The tall man was the Texas Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer for the state. Stanley's lawyer was named Ms. Marengo. Stanley held the suitcase. He was so tired he couldn't think straight. He felt as if he was walking in a dream, not quite able to comprehend what was going on around him. They stopped in front of the camp office. Mr. Sir went inside to get Stanley's belongings. The Attorney General told Mr. Pendanski to get the boys something to drink and eat. The warden seemed as dazed as Stanley. "You can't even read," she said to Zero. Zero said nothing. Ms. Marengo put a hand on Stanley's shoulder and told him to hang in there. He would be seeing his parents soon. She was shorter than Stanley, but somehow gave the appearance of being tall. Mr. Pendanski returned with 2 cartons of orange juice and 2 bagels. Stanley drank the juice, but didn't feel like eating anything. "Wait!" the warden exclaimed. "I didn't say they stole the suitcase. It's his suitcase, obviously, but he put my things from my cabin in it." "That isn't what you said earlier," said Miss Marengo. "What's in the suitcase?" the warden asked Stanley. "Tell us what's in it, and we'll open it and we'll see." Stanley didn't know what to do. "Stanley, as your lawyer, I advise you not to open your suitcase," said Miss Marengo. "He has to open it," said the warden. "I have the right to check the personal property of any of my detainees. How do I know there aren't drugs or weapons in there? He stole a car too. I've got witnesses." She was nearly hysterical. "He is no longer under your jurisdiction," said Stanley's lawyer. "He has not been officially released," said the warden. "Open the suitcase, Stanley." "Do not open it," said Stanley's lawyer. Stanley did nothing. Mr. Sir returned from the office with Stanley's backpack and clothes. The Attorney General handed Miss Marengo a sheet of paper. "You're free to go," he said to Stanley. "I know you're anxious to get out of here, so you can just keep the orange jumpsuit as a souvenir. Or burn it, whatever you want. Good luck, Stanley." He reached out his hand for a shake, but Miss Marengo hurried Stanley away. "Come on, Stanley," she said. "We have a lot to talk about." Stanley stopped and turned to look at Zero. He couldn't just leave him there. Zero gave him the thumbs up. "I can't leave Hector," Stanley said. "I suggest we go," his lawyer said with a sense of urgency in her voice. "I'll be okay," said Zero. His eyes shifted from Mr. Pendanski on one side of him to the warden and Mr. Sir on the other. "There's nothing I can do for your friend," said Miss Marengo. "You are released pursuant to an order from the judge." "They'll kill him," said Stanley. "Your friend is not in danger," said the Attorney General. "There's going to be an investigation into everything that's happened here. For the present, I'm taking charge of the camp." "Come on, Stanley," said his lawyer. "Your parents are waiting." Stanley stayed where he was. His lawyer sighed. "May I have a look at Hector's file?" she asked. "Certainly," said the Attorney General. "Miss Walker, go get Hector's file." She looked at him blankly. "Well?" The warden turned to Mr. Pendanski. "Bring me Hector Zeroni's file." He stared at her. "Get it!" she ordered. Mr. Pendanski went into the office. He returned a few minutes later and announced the file had been apparently misplaced. The Attorney General was outraged. "What kind of camp are you running here, Miss Walker?" The warden said nothing. She stared at the suitcase. The Attorney General assured Stanley's lawyer that he would get the records. "Excuse me while I call my office." He turned back to the warden. "I assume the phone works?" He walked into the camp office, slamming the door behind him. A little while later, he reappeared and told the warden he wanted to talk to her. She cursed, then went inside. Stanley gave Zero the thumbs up. "Caveman, is that you?" He turned to see Armpit and Squid coming out of the rec room. Squid shouted back to the rec room, "Caveman and Zero are out here!" Soon, all the boys from Group D had gathered around him and Zero. "Good to see you, man," Armpit said, shaking his hand. "Thought you were buzzard food." "Stanley is being released today," said Mr. Pendanski. "Way to go!" said Magnet, hitting him on the shoulder. And you didn't even have to step on a rattlesnake, said Squid. Even Zigzag shook Stanley's head. Sorry about, It's cool, said Stanley. We had to lift the truck clear out of the hole, Zigzag told him. It took everybody in C, D, and E. We just picked it right up. That was really cool, said Twitch. X-Ray was the only one who didn't come over. Stanley saw him hanging back behind the others a moment, then returned to the rec room. Guess what? Said Magnet, glancing at Mr. Pendanski. Mom says we don't have to dig any more holes. That's great. Will you do me a favor? Said Squid. I guess, Stanley agreed, somewhat hesitantly. I want you to... He turned to Mrs. Marengo. Hey, lady, have you got a pen and paper I can borrow? She gave it to him, and Squid wrote down a phone number. Then he gave it to Stanley. Call my mom for me, okay? Tell her I said I was sorry. Tell her Alan said he was sorry. Stanley promised he would. Now, you be careful out in the real world, said Armpit. Not everybody's as nice as us. Stanley smiled. The boys departed when the warden came out of the office. The Attorney General was right behind her. My office has some difficulty locating Hector Zeroni's records, the Attorney General said. So you have no claim of authority over him? Asked Miss Marengo. I didn't say that. He's in the computer. We just can't access his records. It's like they've fallen through a hole in cyberspace. A hole in cyberspace? Miss Marengo repeated. How interesting. When is his release date? I don't know. How long has he been here? Like I said, we can't... So what are you planning to do with him? Keep him confined indefinitely, without jurisdiction, while you go crawling through black holes in cyberspace? The Attorney General stared at her. He was obviously incarcerated for a reason. Oh, and what reason was that? The Attorney General said nothing. Stanley's lawyer took a hold of Zero's hand. Come on, Hector, you're going with us. Chapter 49. There never used to be yellow-spotted lizards in the town of Green Lake. They didn't come to the area until after the lake dried up. But the townsfolk had heard about the red-eyed monsters living in the desert hills. One afternoon, Sam, the Onion Man, and his donkey, Mary Lou, were returning to his boat, which was anchored just a little offshore. It was late in November, and the peach trees had lost most of their leaves. Sam! Someone called. He turned around to see 3 men running after him, waving their hats. He waited. Afternoon, Walter, Bo, Jesse, he greeted them, and they walked up, catching their breath. Glad we caught you, said Bo. We're going rattlesnake hunting in the morning. We just want some of your lizard juice, said Walter. I ain't scared of no rattlesnake, said Jesse, but I don't want to come across one of those red-eyed monsters. I seen one once. That was enough. I knew about the red eyes, of course, but I hadn't heard about the big black teeth. It's the white tongues that get me, said Bo. Sam gave each man 2 bottles of pure onion juice. He told them to drink 1 bottle before going to bed that night, then half a bottle in the morning, and then half a bottle around lunchtime. You sure this stuff works? Asked Walter. I'll tell you what, said Sam. If it doesn't, you can come back next week and I'll give you your money back. Walter looked around unsure, as Bo and Jesse laughed. Then Sam laughed too. Even Mary Lou let out a rare hee-haw. Just remember, Sam told the men before they left, it's very important you drink the bottle tonight. You've got to get it into your bloodstream. Lizards don't like onion blood. Stanley and Zero sat in the back seat of Miss Marengo's BMW. The suitcase lay between them. It was locked, and they decided they'd let Stanley's father try to open it in his workshop. You don't know what's in it, do you? She asked. No, said Stanley. I didn't think so. The air conditioning was on, but they drove with the windows out open as well because, no offense, you boys smell really bad. Miss Marengo explained that she was a patent attorney. I'm helping your father with a new product he's invented. He happened to mention your situation, so I did a little investigating. Clyde Livingston's sneakers were stole sometime before 3:15. I found a young man, Derek Doone, who said that at 3:20 you were in the bathroom fishing your notebook out of the toilet. 2 girls remembered seeing you come out of the boys' restroom carrying a wet notebook. Stanley felt his ears redden. Even after everything he'd been through, the memory still caused him to feel shame. "So you couldn't have stolen them," said Mrs. Marengo. "He didn't. I did," said Zero. "You did what?" asked Miss Marengo. "I stole the sneakers." The lawyer actually turned around while driving and looked at him. "I didn't hear that," she said, "and I advise you to make sure I don't hear that again." "What did my father invent?" Stanley asked. "Did he find a way to recycle sneakers?" "No, he's still working on that," explained Miss Marengo. "But he invented a product that eliminates foot odor. Here, I've got a sample in my briefcase. I wish I had more. You two could bathe in it." She opened her briefcase with one hand and passed a small bottle back to Stanley. It had a fresh and somewhat spicy smell. He handed it to Zero. "What's it called?" Stanley asked. "We haven't come up with a name yet," said Miss Marengo. "It smells familiar," said Zero. "Peaches, right?" said Miss Marengo. "That's what everyone says." A short while later, both boys fell asleep. Behind them, the sky turned dark, and for the first time in over 100 years, a drop of rain fell into the empty lake. Part 3. Filling in the Holes. Chapter 50. Stanley's mother insists that there was never a curse. She even doubts whether Stanley's great-great-grandfather really stole a pig. The reader might find it interesting, however, that Stanley's father invented his cure for foot odor the day after the great-great-grandson of Ilna Yelnats carried the great-great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni up the mountain. The Attorney General closed Camp Green Lake. Ms. Walker, who was in desperate need of money, had to sell the land which had been in her family for generations. It was bought by a national organization dedicated to the well-being of young girls. In a few years, Camp Green Lake will become a Girl Scout camp. This is pretty much the end of the story. The reader probably has some questions still, but unfortunately from here on, the answers tend to be long and tedious. While Mrs. Bell, Stanley's former math teacher, might want to know the percent change in Stanley's weight, the reader probably cares more about the change in Stanley's character and self-confidence. But those changes were subtle and hard to measure. There's no simple answer. Even the contents of the suitcase turned out to be somewhat tedious. Stanley's father pried it open in his workshop, and at first everyone gasped at the sparkly jewels. Stanley thought he and Hector had become millionaires, but the jewels were poor quality, worth no more than $20,000. Underneath the jewels was a stack of papers that had once belonged to the first Stanley Yelnats. These consisted of stock certificates, deeds of trust, and promissory notes. They were hard to read and even more difficult to understand. Miss Marengo's law firm spent more than 2 months going through all the papers. They turned out to be a lot more valuable than the jewels. After legal fees and taxes, Stanley and Zero each received less than $1 million, but not a lot less. It was enough for Stanley to buy his family a new house with a laboratory in the basement, and for Hector to hire a team of private investigators. But it would be boring to go through all of the tedious details of all the changes in their lives. Instead, the reader will be presented with one last scene, which took place almost a year and a half after Stanley and Hector left Camp Green Lake. You will have to fill in the other holes yourself. There was a small party at the Yelnats' house. Except for Stanley and Hector, everyone there was an adult. All kinds of snacks and drinks were set out on the corner, including caviar, champagne, and the fixings to make ice cream sundaes. The Super Bowl was on television, but nobody was really watching. "It should be coming on in the next break," Miss Marengo announced. A timeout was called in the football game, and a commercial came on the screen. Everyone stopped talking and watched. The commercial showed a baseball game. Amid a cloud of dust, Clyde Livingston slid into home plate, and the catcher caught the ball and tried to tag him out. "Safe!" shouted the umpire as he signaled with his arms. The people at Stanley's house cheered as if the run really counted. Clyde Livingston got up, dusted the dirt off his uniform. As he made his way back to the dugout, he spoke to the camera. "Hi, I'm Clyde Livingston, but everyone around here calls me Sweet Feet." "Way to go, Sweet Feet," said another baseball player, slapping his hand. Besides being on television screen, Clyde Livingston was also sitting on the couch next to Stanley. "But my feet weren't always sweet," the television Clyde Livingston said as he sat down in the dugout bench. "They used to smell so bad that nobody would sit near me in a dugout." "They really did stink," said the woman sitting on the couch on the other side of Clyde. She held her nose with one hand and fanned the air with the other. Clyde shushed her. "Then a teammate told me about sploosh," said the television Clyde. He pulled a can of sploosh out from under the dugout bench and held it up for everyone to see. "I just spray a little in each foot every morning, and now I really do have sweet feet. Plus, I like the tingle." "Sploosh," said a voice. "A treat for your feet. Made from all natural ingredients. It neutralizes odor-causing fungi and bacteria. Plus, you'll like the tingle." Everyone at the party clapped their hands. "He wasn't lying," said the woman who sat next to Clyde. "I couldn't even be in the same room with his socks." The other people at the party laughed. The woman continued, "I'm not joking. It was so bad." "You made your point," said Clyde, covering her mouth with his hand. He looked at Stanley. "Will you do me a favor, Stanley?" Stanley raised and lowered his left shoulder. "I'm going to get more caviar," said Clyde. "Keep your hand over my wife's mouth." He patted Stanley on the shoulder, and he rose from the couch. Stanley looked uncertainly at his hand, then at Clyde Livingston's wife. She winked at him. He felt himself blush and turned away toward Hector, who was sitting on the floor in front of an overstuffed chair. A woman, sitting in the chair behind Hector, was absent-mindedly fluffing his hair with her fingers. She wasn't very old, but her skin had a weathered look to it, almost like leather. Her eyes seemed weary, as if she'd seen too many things in her life that she didn't want to see. And when she smiled, her mouth seemed too big for her face. Very softly, she half sang, half hummed, a song that her grandmother used to sing to her when she was a little girl. If only, the moon speaks no reply, reflecting the sun and all that's gone by. Be strong, my wary wolf, turn around boldly, fly high, my baby bird, my angel, my only. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed the end of our book. Let's discuss those last few chapters. What did Miss Marengo advise Stanley to do when the warden ordered him to open up the suitcase? She said, "Don't do it." He has been released from that camp, and he does not have to listen to her, especially when she was being crazy. Why did Mr. Pendanski hesitate, kind of stare at the warden, when the warden ordered him to get Hector Zeroni's file? Do you remember what happened? So when Hector first ran away, when Zero ran away, they were going to make him disappear. They shredded his papers, and they called someone they knew who could make all his files disappear on the computers. Not good. Why do you think the author brought back that story of Sam the Onion Picker and the Rattlesnake Hunters? I think it was to tell us why those yellow-spotted lizards did not bite Stanley or Zero. The boys had eaten only onions for a week straight. And what did Sam the Onion Picker say? Lizards don't like onions. Nice to know. So if you ever go to a desert, eat some onions first. Describe the new product that Stanley's father has invented. It's something to make stinky feet smell sweet. I hope they use that phrase. That was a pretty good one. So it smells like peaches, and anyone's feet who get stinky, they just spray it on there. What happens as the boys drive away at Green Lake for the first time in 100 years? It rains. Maybe that lake will someday fill back up, huh? In our last chapter, which is part 3, filling in the holes, how did the curse get resolved? So, to remember, we have to go all the way back and remember what Stanley's no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing great-great-grandfather was supposed to do. So he carried a pig up and down a mountain that Madame Zeroni had given him, and he was supposed to sing it a song. At the end of this time, he was then supposed to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain and sing her a song. Well, what did Stanley end up doing when they got to God's thumb? He carried Zero up the mountain, and after he took a drink, sang him that song. He broke the curse. What did they find in the suitcase that was very, very valuable? They were old, almost like bank statements and stock ownership papers. So they owned parts of companies and they could get money back from them. So both boys got like $1 million. Pretty cool. And what was this new foot odor product called? Do you remember what they called it? Sploosh. That was what Zero called the weird peach drink that he drank. So the last thing, at the end, there's a lady who is stroking Zero's hair and singing him a song. Who do you think that was? It was Zero's mom. He had found her and they were a family again. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this book as much as I did. And also, there is a movie adaptation of this book. I know it's on Disney Plus right now and easily found if you wanted to rent somewhere. Great version of it. We are going to have a fun little book review and party in a couple days, so look out for that Zoom invite, and we'll see you then. Bye, everyone!